Good morning. Freilichen Shushan Purim. We are on page 410, top of 410 in the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, Mi Kashem Elokeinu, which is the source text, the source material for especially the conclusion of Hemshech Hayim Beis. So we'll continue from there. Let us okay, the program is dedicated in loving memory of Ariel ben Avram Aroni, Zachreinu Levracha, Hashem Yimkom Damai. We're learning about Torah Ohr, Ner Mitzvah v'Torah Ohr. As we've discussed a number of times in the general overview, this is part of the whole structure of explaining the entire picture of the purpose of existence, that a neshama, which is a divine entity, comes down into this world, but in this world it gets all concealed. And the neshama too does not easily access the divine without avodah, without work. And the work of the neshama, which includes its own faculties, using its mind and its emotions to awaken and stimulate divine consciousness and divine feelings, is part of the process. But in addition to that, the neshama also has ner mitzvah v'Torah Ohr as resources, with the mitzvah being like a ner, like we learned, that the mitzvahs have the unique power to help transform the physical world, and the nefesh habamis, as the Rebbe Rashab made clear, the 2 points that the mitzvahs accomplish, and it leads to Torah Ohr, the Ohr Atzmi that we're learning about, the very core Ohr that expresses the divine, that's before the Tzimtzum, the highest levels of Elokus, the most concealed, the most intimate levels are being revealed. So the neshama, armed with ner mitzvah and Torah Ohr, is able to bring the light of the divine and create a dira b'tachtein. We will discuss what the neshama's role is, what the neshama has that the mitzvah and Torah do not have, that when the neshama really reaches its zenith, its highest point, it actually contributes to the mitzvah and to Torah, in addition, of course, to the fact that Torah mitzvahs without a neshama are just resources, exactly what they are. The neshama is what brings them alive. And we'll talk all about that as we move forward and conclude the Mittler Rebbe's explanation. But this is also the central themes of Ayin Beis. As I said, as we get back to Ayin Beis, I will point out where these ideas are discussed throughout the Hemshech. I recently found some more material in Volume 2, and as well as in Volume 3, that all adds up and fits very well into this whole picture once we learn the Mittler Rebbe's understanding of it, because at the end of the day, the Rebbe Rashab did not conclude the Hemshech. So though the Hemshech is over 1,400 pages, 1,476 pages to be exact, nevertheless, he didn't conclude it. So the last pieces, where everything comes together, we can draw from the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, as I've been continuously explaining. So we are right now is in the understanding of what Torah is, Torah Ohr. So overall, Torah Ohr, and still in the middle of the question that he said needs more explanation, which is what we learned in the last class. Why is ner mitzvah called ner mitzvah, seemingly suggesting that without Torah there's no light? It's only a ner, it's only a candle, meaning it's the ingredients of a wick and the oil, the fuel, but the light comes from the Torah. When mitzvahs reach also the highest levels, the Ratzon Elyon, Keser, Galgalta, like he said. And to say, because the Torah is there, Atzmi, he said, so the same you can say with mitzvahs, he said the words, he said, Halei Gama mitzvah sharshin be'era Atzmi was the Ein Sof, and it's also called the 620 pillars of light. So middle of understanding that as well, which is all part of, again, Hemshech Chaim Beis, to the Rebbe Rashab did ask these questions. So we will get back to that. So in understanding it, we learned essentially that in Torah there's two levels of light. In Torah's light is a Er Atzmi, which is not subject and not affected by the tzimtzum. Like he says, B'li Shini Mahus Klal. Those are the words. She'en by Shini Mahus Klal. It's exactly the way the way it's reflected, the way it's in the Etzem, the divine energy. Pre-tzimtzum, that's the way we receive the Torah. We still have to reveal it for ourselves, but the Torah has all that within it. The Torah itself did not go through a tzimtzum, even though it did come into existence, into Ishtalshlus. Now, what we're beginning to learn here is that itself, the Torah itself has also two levels. In addition to the fact that it's higher than the Ohr that is affected by Tzimtzum, Torah has two levels. But he called two Chochmas. Chochmas b'chutz Torah, two Chochmas, Chochma Ilaah, Chochma Tata, which in turn, which he compared to, he said, to the two colors of a flame, which is interesting because Neir is actually a flame, a candle, so it could be that's why he's bringing it as well, which are the two Gvani Ha'esh, the whitish fire that radiates, and the darker fire that burns the wick and draws the fuel, the oil, and consumes it. And these two levels of Ohr radiate two levels of Cheshach. They illuminate Beis Min Cheshach, Cheshach Ha'elyon and Cheshach Ha'tachten. Shezehu Cheshach Sisrei, Chashma Le'elyon, Shezehu Cheshach Ha'elyon, which is that the Ohr of Torah, with the Cheshach Elyon, most likely referring here to the highest levels of Cheshach, which is the Tzimtzum Arishin, Cheshach Sisrei, as we learned earlier, but he calls Chashma Elyon, which I'll get to in a moment. This is the Torah pierces that darkness and illuminates it. Yehi Ohr. And the second level of Torah, which is the Torah, which is Chochma Tata, is called Chashma Tachten, of Noiga. That's already the darkness that associates with Klippas, meaning lower levels where there's already something that is not, that which is not aligned with godliness. The first Cheshach is aligned with godliness. It's God's power to conceal. However, it's still concealment. It's a divine concealment. Now it's already Tachten the Nega Klippas Nega, Cheshach Mamish of the night. And this, the Chochma Tata, Chashmal Tachten, it radiates Mamata Lamaila, which is the next point. The first level of light goes Mamata Lamata from the top down, and the second is Mamata Lamaila Ohr Chezer. And that's where we stopped. He's now going to explain what are these two levels in Torah. So let me just add, since he does mention Chashmal Elyon, Chashmal Tachten, let's explain that. So Chashmal is an expression, as I mentioned, used by Yecheskel and in his vision, Chashmal, Kein Chashmal, he writes. He says, the same verses where he talks about Chayas HaKedesh and Ratzah B'Shuv. So in the Kabbalah and Chassidus, if you want to have a source, one of the places, a few places, but I'll refer to the Torah Ohr, the Alter Rebbe's Maimer, Torah Ohr Lech Lecha. There's a Maimer on Pareches, Vaylecha Pareches. So there he discusses the Chashmal, what that is exactly. Briefly, Chashmal is the name of a Malach, but Chashmal is also a divine level. The Maimer is called Yivdilu HaPareches on 12.3 in Torah Ohr, page 12c, I should say, 12c. Okay. So Chashmal is a level, is a Malach, but even higher than a Malach, it's a divine energy that generally is just another name, what we would call the Parsa, a partition, Chashmal. The partition. But there's two levels of a Chashmal. There's the Chashmal Elyon, Chashmal Tachten, the partition above, which is before Atzilus to Atzilus, and the next parsa between from Atzilus to Biyah is called the Chashmal Tachten. The truth is, in Ayin Beis, volume 2, he did speak about Chashmal as well, when he spoke about the Parsois, the whole discussion there about the partitions and the curtains and the veils and the filters. There's a long discussion in volume 2. I believe it's in the Maimer of Bamidbar Ayin Hey. Let me make sure. I think in Bamidbar he talks about the Chashmal. Just if you want to have resources, references rather. Let me see. Yeah, I think it's right here on page 986. He talks about it, yeah. The bottom line is, it refers to the partitions. So the Chashmal Elyon, apparently here he's referring to is like the Tzimtzum Arishan, the first partition between the Ohr Yoshor before the Tzimtzum and the Tzimtzum, which is like Atzillah between, Atzillah is the Klolos and Biyah, I'm not sure, but regardless, the higher level of Choshen. And the Chashmal Tachton is already one connected to between Atzilus and Biyah, and there you're already getting into a world that is not purely divine any longer. It has its own identity, what he calls here Neiga, or Klippas Neiga. So that's the name's Chashmal. If you want to look up some more, you look in Sefer Lekutim from the Tzemach Tzedek, which I refer to often. There's an entry called Chashmal. He also discusses it. In the Gemara, the word Chashmal, there are two interpretations. One is that it's the fiery speech. It's angels that speak, mal from the word speaking. And it's like he says there. And there's a second explanation that chashmal are two words. Chash means quiet, and mal means to speak. So there's a time that they're quiet, they speak. In Torah Ed, he explains the connection to what we're discussing now, the concealment. Obviously, silence is a form of concealment. So that's discussed there in Torah Ed and other places. Okay, regarding our discussion, he refers to it, but for a practical purpose, think of it as the higher concealment and lower concealment. And good. And Torah already illuminates both. That's why the Torah has two levels of Ohr. So now we're going to explain what are these two levels of Ohr in Torah. And he's going to explain that this is the difference between the written Torah and the oral Torah, which one was given to us. Well, we'll learn it inside. I won't jump the gun here, but I will make reference that this topic of written Torah, oral Torah, and the two levels of Chochma have been discussed earlier in Ayin Beis, and I can tell you where as well. That is, I believe, in the Maimers of Truma Ayin Hey, where he began to speak about the two levels of Chochma. And there I also noticed that he speaks about Chochma Sa'elam as well. So I think this is all going to come together, because remember, Shemen, the oil, he referred to as Chochma of this world. Seichel Anushi, the Chochma, the wisdom of the animal soul and of this natural world, and the human intelligence. And he said here, Torah is the ultimate Chochma. That is the source of all intelligence, like we learned earlier. So now in Torah itself, talk about Torah Sheba'al Peh and Torah Shebiksav. So this is discussed firstly in Ayin Beis, and I'll refer to it when we need to get there. I believe here we are. Also in the same topic of the Parsois, on page 882 and on, where he talks about it. 882, two levels of Chochmah. And then in volume 3, I already made reference to it when we spoke about the 3 Mikra Mishnah Talmud. Began a whole topic in the beginning after page 1352, where he started speaking about Torah Ohr. So there he also explained, to be the exact pages, where he starts speaking about the 3 levels of Torah. And there he talked also at length about Torah Shebiksav and Torah Sheba'al Peh, the difference between them. And when you look there, you'll see that it has quite a few parallels to what we're learning here. That is on page 1364. If you're interested in looking these things up, as I said, I will tie it all together as we learn these ideas and how it all connects to the themes in Ayin Beis. But right now, for all practical purposes, we're talking about Torah's impact on existence, and now we're talking about 2 levels of Ohr of Torah. Remember, it's Torah's Ohr Atzmi, but there's 2 levels of that Ohr as it manifests. So now we'll start on top of page 410, and the member of the Mittler Rebbe. And the pages can be found if you want to follow the PDF at ayinbeis.com. So line 2. So I have to explain that there's 2 levels of Ohr. One is Ohr Yoshor, Mamayla Lamata. It's a light that shines downward. And the other is Mamata Lamayla. Ohr Chayzer, he says, Zeu Inyan Beis Teres. And these are the 2 parts of Torah. He says 2 Teres. He doesn't mean there's 2 Teres, God forbid. He means 2 Teres, Teres Shebiksav and Teres Shebapel. They're both called Torah. One, Aleph, Teres Shebiksav, the written Torah. The Asis Hagdashim, written with the holy letters. Shabbat, Shabbat. The holy letters within this Torah. Within the Torah consists of letters. And a Sefer Torah, made up of letters. Shesharsham ba'ir ha'atzmi is the Ein Sof Mamish. The root of these letters, where they originate from, in the Ohr Atzmis of Ein Sof Mamish, literally the ultimate infinite. B'kedushas ha'atzmus the Ein Sof u'pnimius atzmus Chochma Ilaah. These are words we used that we learned earlier as well. Kedushas ha'atzmus, that's why they're holy. The Sefer Torah is holy, and the letters are holy. They're sacred because they have that the sanctity. They manifest the sanctity of Kedushas ha'atzmus of Ein Sof, and the Pnimius Atzmus of Chochma and Ratzon, of the Eibishter's wisdom and will. Because the Torah has wisdom in it, which is Hashem's wisdom, God's wisdom, and has God's will. It manifests what God wants of us. And all of that is manifested in the Eisius of the Torah Shebiksav. And that's the emphasis, Biksav. It's written. Hashem engraved it. First, he engraved it in the letters, in the tablets, in the Aseres HaDibros, in the Luchis. And then he told Moshe to write it all down. It was all written down, and those written letters, Torah Shebiksav, manifest this Kedusha. U'kamesha Kosav, like it says, V'osa mirvavis Kedush ha'elyon. So the word Osa comes from the word Eisius. So you see from this that Eisius, they come from Mirvavis Kedush ha'elyon, from the highest level of Kedusha above. It says Nisma Le'el, page 22. Let me see on page 22 what they say in there. I mean, it's a pasuk. But I want to see if there's more to than just the pasuk. Yeah, and Zesa Bracha. Yeah, look at the okay. Got it.
The also Meirive voice Kodesh. I don't know if he's referring to that.
Yeah, Zesa Bracha. Zesa Bracha Lamed Gimel Beis. Yeah. Good. So that tells you about the Eisius. So, okay. In other words, so it's not just the wisdom and the will, but it comes actually into letters. Shenikroim Eisius Atzmius. Or Shenikrois. These letters are called core Eisius Atzmim. So let me explain what he's saying here. When you write letters, you could say that letters are just a superficial vehicle to express yourself. Your letters are not holy letters. When you and I write a letter to each other, or you write notes for yourself, or you write a grocery list, a shopping list, the letters are just to be able to accurately convey what you want to achieve. So you make yourself a to-do list. You're not going to give sanctity to the letters. Because those are Eisius Cheteni, those are outer letters. But then there are Eisius, what he calls Eisius Gedeshis or Eisius Atzmeis, where the Eisius themselves are divine. The Eibishter chose these letters, exactly these letters. They're not just to describe what he wants. The letters themselves are, the channels themselves are divine. Eisius Atzmeis, Shekol Atzmei Mehusim Melubish Behem. His whole essence, his whole being, his whole Etzem and Mahus are manifest in these letters. Which is why the letters of Torah are not optional. You can't say, you know what, it says Bereishis Bara Elokim, I'll use a little different expression. Like we see very often, we paraphrase things. We change the words to express, to explain it. The letters are exactly meant to be read exactly as they're written, because those are letters that come straight from the source. And then he adds, "Shenivdul be'erech me'esi sheberotzen v'chochma." Let's see what he means by this. So we know, we've learned this in Ayin Beis. There are letters in Rotzen, and there are letters in Chochma, because when we conceive of ideas, and even our will always has letters. Letters is essentially the structure of how the idea, whatever it is that we want or we understand, is being expressed. That's the letters. Af lahaitzilu livrei. I think what he's saying is that the Oisies themselves are rooted all the way in the Etzem and Mahus. And then they come down, Shenivdil Be'erech, he's saying, then they come down in Hashem's Rotzen, Hashem's Chochmah. I think that's what he's saying. Af lahaitz v'livrei. To also emanate and create. In other words, the same letters that, let's say, Asarim Amoris Nivra Elam, those are also letters and words. But those are words and letters that are already coming down to talk about Yehi Ohr, Yehi Rakia, to create. So they're also divine letters. La'elam Hashem Dvarcha Nitzah B'Shamayim, it's God's words. But the words that originate in Etzem and Torah, it's not the words that are connected to creation, like we've been learning. The words in Torah are words of Kedusha that go all the way to the Etzem. I think that's what he's distinguishing here. So in other words, he's saying that these are called Eishis Atzmim, Shekol Atzmim Husim Alibush Bam. That's what you'll find in Torah. When it comes to the letters and words that Hashem uses to create existence, you don't say Kol Atzmim Husim Malubish Bam. You don't say Anon Nafshi Kshavis Yehovis like you say on Anoichi. There, God, yes, he said Yehi Rakia, Yehi Me'eris, Teitzeres Desha. These are all God's expressions, but he didn't put his whole Atzmus Mus. Al derech, when we read in Tanya, when he says created the human being, so it says Vayipach Ba'apav Nishmas Chaim. So the Alter Rebbe explains from the Zohar, Vayipach means Nefichim and Techiyusei Matzmusei. When you speak, you don't put your whole etzem in it. It's when you blow, when you infuse something with your breath, your whole inner is being expressed. So speech can be, you're speaking, it's expressing what you want, but it's more expressing more of an outer dimension. I think that's what he's saying here. Yeah, that is what he's saying. So Eishis Atzmes the Torah is Shekol Atzmim Husim Melubish Behem. And that's nivdul from the letters as they come into the Rotzen and the Chochmah to create, to emanate Atzilus and then Bria, Kamesha Kosev, the Gol of Galifa. That's a lower level. It says, Bereisha Manusa de Malka. In the beginning, when God chose, when God desired and gave permission to create existence, Gol of Galifa B'Tirei Ilaah. He engraved letters in this level called Tehirei Ilaah, which is the Eir before the Tzimtzum usually is explained. Shashir Ba'atzmei B'Keach. This is an expression we've heard many times, where God is envisioning and allocating b'kayach in potential what is going to need to create. So we're not talking about here the etzemus. We're talking already how the alakus is already identifying and engaging and relating to existence. So it's also letters. That's Golav Galifa, but it's letters that are already connecting and relating to existence. Whereas the Eishis of Torah go all the way back to what he called Atzmus, Eishis Atzmiyes. Eda Atzmi, the Kedushas Atzmus. V'hu, Ohr Ha'elyon de Chochma Ilaah de Torah HaKadesha. This is the supernal, the higher level of Ohr, of Chochma Ilaah. Remember we said there's two levels of Chochma, so he's talking here the higher level, Chochma Ilaah, of the Holy Torah, Shehu B'chinas Eitz HaChayim Mamish. He's now referring it to the Eitz HaChayim. We say Eitz Chayim Hila Machzikim Bo. Torah is referring to the tree of life. Shalamai Laharba Eitz Hadas, which is much higher than the level of Eitz Hadas. You may recall I referred to Geras HaKedesh, Simon Chavav 26, where he quotes the Zohar that the difference between Torah Shebiksav and where there he's talking about Nigla, and actually Primis Torah and Nigla the Torah. But the similar idea in Torah Shebiksav, Torah Shebal Peh, well, one is called Eitz HaChaim, one is called Eitz HaDas. He explains, how could you call Eitz HaDas on Torah? So he says, because it talks about Tevirah, not because, God forbid, there's good and evil. The Torah that engages with arguments and with disagreements and with the Taina Shel Sheker, where there's right and wrong and so on. But regardless, getting back to this point, this level of Torah we're talking is called Eitz HaChaim, which is much higher than Eitz HaDas. We'll talk about that more as he talks about the second level of Chochma. This is all Chochma Ilaah. Okay, so these all coming to explain the first level of Chochma. This is going to go on till the next page, the next paragraph, where on page 411 rather. That's when we'll get back to Chochma Tata and Torah Shebal Peh. So this whole section now is all dedicated to the written Torah and to Chochma Ilaah, a Torah that is Hamshach Ohr Atzmi, the Kedushas Atzmus, like he says, that the letters themselves, the Kodesh Eidel and the Chochma Ilaah, is Eitz HaChaim Mamish, much higher than Eitz HaDas. And now he's going to explain how that Torah comes down below into Ishtalshalos, because we were given that Torah. That Torah doesn't remain in those highest levels; it came down to earth. But let me stop if there are any questions so far. Now he continues. The Yarda, and this Torah from this highest level of Chochma Ilaah, this pure, pristine level of the divine, Yarda, it descended b'ishtalshlus ha'elamis, in the cosmic order, in the gradation and the order process of the world, the assembly line, if you wish, of the world. Ma'atzmus Ein Sof, where did it descend from? From the core of Ein Sof, L'Atzilus, to the world of Atzilus. V'nikra Teirus Atzilus. And there, this Torah now is called the Torah of Atzilus. And from there, it continued the journey. Ad Torah Haniglas Lanu, and it continues the journey through Bria, Tzirasir, till the Torah that's revealed to us. I mean, he's been using that expression a number of times, that the Torah that's revealed to us carries the Torah as it is in its Etzem, until the Torah that's revealed to us, but Asi is the Torah Shebiksav, in the letters of the written Torah. So when you look now into Torah and start Bereishis Bara L'Kim S'Shemaim V'Sa'aretz, and the whole Torah, everything in the written Torah, that is originated in Atzmus Ein Sof, came down level by level, to Atzilus, all the way down to us in the letters of Torah Shebiksav that we can tangibly read and relate to in a concrete way. V'chola Eishir Shabbat, and all the letters in the written Torah, Me'irim Me'ir HaKedesh HaElyon, they radiate and are illuminated from where? From the Ohr Kodesh Elyon, from the light of this supernal Kedusha and holiness that he was referring to, from the highest levels, Valkain. And that's why Hem B'Misper Kotzuf, and that's why they're very defined. A Misper Kotzuf are particular measured letters with very precise measurement, not more, not less. U'B'Choser V'Yatir, and letters that are written, sometimes they're missing a letter, like a letter written without a vav or without a yud. Or yatir, sometimes with an extra letter. The kriv eksiv, and the precision of sometimes how you read it and how it's written. It's not always the same. It could be written one way and you read it a different way. All this is extremely precise. V'nidrish mehen kol halachas v'dinin de mitzvahs. And from there we derive, from there we learn, and we're able to extract nidrish, like bedrush, through study, able to extract all the halachas and the law, all the dinim, all the halachas, all the laws, and all the rules of mitzvahs. So you see, when you learn Torah Shebal Peh, what are they doing? They're being medayik in every letter of the Torah. One extra letter can change the whole meaning, and you can derive a whole halacha just from that. All this is extreme precision. Why? You could argue, one second, the Torah above has that intensity, but when it came down below, the letters are not as key, critical, God forbid. No. These very letters of the Torah Shebiksav carry all that precise divine, called source code, as I've described a number of times, exactly. So they'll think of a computer program. Someone will say, who really cares? I'll change a few lines of the program. No, it doesn't work that way. Every letter, if not every letter, every dot, even an extra dot or missing a dot can wreak havoc. It has to be exact, precise. Now, how much more so when you're talking about the divine code? So the Torah, in all its exact letters, is exactly the way it is aligned with the way it's in Kodesh Elyon. And from there we derive all our halachas b'din and the mitzvahs. Shekol zeh is describing all this. Nikra b'chinas bitter the Ohr Yoshor. This is all called the bitter of Ohr Yoshor. Let's explain, translate what that means. Bitter means to clarify or to separate. Bitter. Bitter, when you have a bunch of things and they're all confused or they're all jumbled together, you don't have bitter. Bitter means that you're separating and you're clarifying. But you can clarify in different ways. Here, the clarity is coming from above of Ohr Yoshor. A light of Torah is shining. Hashem gave us Torah, and that light is shining to clarify and separate and distinguish the exact details that are relevant to what the Torah wants us to know and to do. That the light of Torah to illuminate gam kol cheshech v'helam also comes to illuminate also every darkness and every concealment. That it shouldn't conceal and cover up. So in other words, we choose.
It's getting really hard to hear you, Rabbi.
Go down this path in my life or this path in my life.
We can't hear you.
I don't know. Oh, you guys
is it just me?
It's slowing.
I can hear you.
But it's going. It seems okay right now.
Is it okay? Okay.
It seems better. It was really choppy, and I didn't hear. If you could repeat from Shekolze Nikra B'chinas Biro, the Ohr Yoshor.
I'm in the middle of explaining. You'll hear it all. I'm in the middle of teaching it. It'll be clear.
I know, but we can't hear the words you're saying.
You can't hear what I'm saying, you guys?
No, it's choppy. Keep going, please. It's a little better.
Okay, I don't really have control over the choppiness, so what can I tell you? Hopefully it works. Okay. So essentially, the Torah is coming to a given situation. You want to know, should I go down this path in my life or this path? Like it says, I give you two paths, the path of life and the path of the opposite. How do you know what to do? So the Torah comes like an illuminating light, like we've spoken about, like a cosmic headlights or cosmic light that shines on the path to tell us what's the correct and what's not correct. That's Torah of Ohr Yoshor, from Mamayil Lamata, that illuminates the darkness of this world. Kamesha Omar, like it says, that Keda be'esis the Torah Shebiksav ki Keda b'shmeisav mamash. So there's an expression that when that kol Torah kula shmeisav shal Kadosh Baruch Hu. The entire Torah and all its letters are names of God. They're divine. She says, when a person reads the letters of the written Torah, it's like he's reading the names of God mamash. That's how powerful they are. They're not just letters of words that are describing what you should do, what you shouldn't do. Their very letters are the Gedushas Ha'atzmos, are the Shmeisav Mamish, the Hainu B'chinas Shmeisav Ha'atzmi Mamish. The very core names of God Himself. That's the extent. Not just when it says Havaya or Lakim and the name, but every letter. That's what the Ramban writes. And how's the connection? All good? Is it clear?
Better, definitely better.
Shekol atzmuse
Right now
muhuse
it's normal.
hapnimius.
Yes, thank you.
Nifne. Shekol atzmuse muhuse hapnimius nifne al yidei kriya zu. When you call someone by name, they turn to you. Call them by name, they turn to you. So this is a mashal. He's saying the same thing with Torah. That when you read Torah, you're calling God by His name. So kol atzmuse, all his entire core and essence, is nifne, is directed toward you, turns toward you when you call Him. Like it says, l'chol asher yikru be'emes. To all that call to Him with an emes, sincerely, with truth. Be'emes the Torah dafke. So be'emes is referring to the emes of Torah dafke. To all that call to Him. So the call to God, the best way is you're calling Him by His names. What are His names? He gave us His names. That's called the Torah. So he's referring to Torah now as the names of God. Shebehen meir, in these names, in them radiate amitis muhuse v'atzmuse. The truth of His core and His essence radiate in these words of the Torah, these letters of the Torah. Titan emes liYaakov. Like it says, Titan emes, give emes to Yaakov. That's referring Shahu Torah shebiksav. That emes is referring to the truth of Torah of the written Torah. Titan emes liYaakov. That's what he means. Yikra'u be'emes. So you're calling with the emes of Torah, and you're calling and drawing down that level. Continuing on, v'zehu Chochma Ilaah sheyeredes lamata levader lahavdin gam ben tevera. Now I was going to refer to this is now in general. He spoke about it illuminates and brings us down the highest levels of Dushas Ha'atzmus. But the Torah also tells us about right and wrong. So he says, this is the Chochma Ilaah from Torah that descends below Levader to separate and to clarify. Lahavdil and to separate, or Levader to clarify, Lahavdil and separate. Gam ben Tevera, also between what is good and what is not good. What is right, what is wrong. Being that this light of Torah, who mokim umadrege de era atzmis, is coming from the place and level of the very core of Eir Ein Sof, like he said before, meiru mavik b'yeser, irradiates and illuminates and shines in an increased fashion, like a very glaring, mavik is like a very powerful light, ad shenitcha chol chesher meponav, to the point that it dispels and pushes aside, dissipates all darkness in its presence. So a small light also dissipates, also dispels darkness, but a light of this intensity, essentially anything that's in its way, that's dark, gets completely eliminated. So it completely illuminates and pushes aside any darkness. In this case, darkness means also ignorance, confusion, and so on. Ulakach, and therefore, yesh b'keich ha'chochma zu de Torah shebiksav. That's why this level of wisdom in Torah shebiksav, Chochma Ilaah, has the power, lahavdil hara min hatev b'tachlis, to separate utterly and unequivocally ra from tev, the evil from the good. In other words, if a person doesn't have Torah, and look at the world today, look at the moral confusion and the moral clutter and the fog that people live in. You can talk to people and they don't be able to distinguish what is right and what is wrong. University presidents are able to say a call for genocide of Jews, but it depends on context, whether it's appropriate or not, whether it breaks their rules. I mean, anyone that can say anything like that, clearly they don't have this birur between Tev and Ra. So as soon as you can start blurring the lines between right and wrong, between good and evil, that's the opposite. Torah is the exact opposite. Torah states it very clear, this is right and this is wrong, this is good and this is evil. Only who can do that? only when you have a very clear light that comes from a higher place, that's not subject to any other concerns and other calculations and subjectivity that can distort and blur these lines. So the Torah shines with that intensity, and that's why it has the koyach of this chochma koyach b'chochma zu to determine what is lahavdil haram in atev b'tachlis, unequivocally, utterly. And this, he says in the parentheses, is called shanikra. This clarity, this crystallized clarity is called shanikra is dachachus hara. That's called a refinement, is dachachus hara. The word hazdachus, like from the word zichuch, means it can mean to clarify, it can mean to refine. Hizdachus hara, in other words, you're identifying and you're shining the light, so it becomes very clear what is ra. It's not blurred. Shazeu rak biur hara minatev. This is only this is only the level of biur hara, biur from like biur chametz, where you are extracting and completely eliminating the ra from the good. In other words, initially they could be mixed together like a snowball effect, and what you're doing is separating the two and drawing out the evil so they're not mixed. Like this is, for example, when you have someone, let's say, God forbid, someone that's abusive, coming from a person that's a relative or a family member or a loving person who's abusive. Why is it so confusing? Because it's coming from a person who loves you and should love you. So the first thing you need is birur. You need to be mavai. You need to separate the two. You need to show, yes, here's the good part, but here's the part that's not good. When it gets mixed together, that's when you have the biggest problems. That's why it says by Chetei Tzadas, the biggest problem was the mix. It's not just that there's good and evil, that it gets confusing and you can't know which part is good, which part is evil. I mean, just to give a very a painful example would be like cancer. The only way to get rid of the good cell, the bad cells, is to get rid of the good cells, because they get so mixed, because it's so intertwined. It's a disease that affects the very person himself. So in other words, the key thing is to extract and draw out and eliminate the negative from the positive. And the example for this, the classic example, is kibir kesef anoki min apselis. So silver. So we know when you mine silver, so it also has sediment in it, and it has all different stuff. So what do you want to do to draw the best silver? You draw out and kibir kesef anoki min apselis from the waste and the dross kiyadua. So that's an example of birur that's brought often in Chassidus. Kesef, sometimes the same thing idea is when you take out what's the difference? The shaft when you're picking wheat or grain, when you have to separate the shaft from the forgot what the other part is called, whatever it's called. And the same thing is so many areas where you need to take out the pits from the fruit or the fruit from the pit. So this is basically the process of birur, of separating and clarifying good from evil and evil from good. So the birur of biur hara min atev. So when you burn, for example, certain objects, why do you burn it? When you burn it, it breaks it down to its core elements, core ingredients, and then you could get rid of some of the dirt or some of the things, some of the unwanted stuff. That's by burning it. There are different methods used to be able to separate. When you boil water, for example, at times, same idea. You're boiling the water, it also gets rid of some of the sediment to cleanse things. This is all the process of biur or birur. So biur is actually the process of burning, that you burn, like you're burning chametz and so on like that. So all this, Torah Shebiksav has this power because it's coming from such a high level of ohr that has that intensity to just shine through and break through and be able to clarify and give us that total unequivocal clarity, what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is evil. And you see it. You see people who have that type of moral clarity, they just have something in them, that vision, like almost like X-ray vision. And then you see people who are more ambiguous and more wishy-washy and unclear, moral relative and so on. And it's unclear what is right and wrong. The idea of having that clarity comes from a very intense ohr that comes all the way from the Eir Kedushas Atzmos, like he puts it, to go back to the words he said, the emes of Torah. So he says, that's why Meir and Mavik B'Yeser, it shines with such intensity and therefore eliminates all darkness before it. A weaker light may not do it. A very powerful light will identify every fiber, every piece of dust. You need strong light for that. It's actually when you do Bir Chametz, actually the night of before Pesach, same idea. You use a flame, and you need to have sometimes a strong flame to be able to find every speck of dust or chametz and so on. So the stronger the light, the more powerful the light, the more it will identify clearly what is good and what is not. Okay. Any questions so far?
I had a question. I've been waiting to ask.
And the parentheses, the parentheses I should add, I believe ends right here. The parentheses, the shenikris dachachus, probably ends after the word kiyadua. It's a 2-line parentheses. That's what it looks like to me. And then comes another parentheses. Okay, go ahead.
I had a question about the revelation of the very essence of God through the written Torah, that the oisios, the letters themselves, are a revelation of his essence. It seems in tension with the notion of not limiting the essence of God. I mean, every other place. I mean, we talk about you can't really limit God. I mean, he has names. Those are revelations. Those are expressions of godliness. So the Torah can be an expression of godliness, but to say that it's mamash the atzmius of it, I mean, it seems like a limitation that's inconsistent with how we typically conceive of the atzmus or the atzmius, of
you're saying God. You're saying you want to limit God, that he can't express himself, the expression he can't express himself in words that we can relate to.
No, I'm saying
limitation. That's why we say, just like he has the power of the infinite, he has the power of the finite. He's taking his essence, and in Torah, he's giving it to us in a package, just like we speak about the Mishkan. So Shlomo HaMelech said, heaven and heaven of heavens can't contain you. How could this building? So God said, that's exactly what I'm telling you. I'm not limited by Bligvul either. The infinite is also not God's natural place. He's beyond both. And he can take his Etzem and package it. That's the whole idea of Torah. That's the whole idea of Mishkan. That's even a neshama in a way is part of that as well. But in Torah, it's in a revealed way. That's exactly what Torah is. Anoichi, and now nafshis ksavis Yehav, as the Gemara says. I have written my very soul in these words. That's what makes Torah different, lahavdil, from every other object in existence, where there God did not express his essence. And Torah is giving us, you want me? Learn my Torah and you're getting me. Like a tzaddik. How do you connect that tzaddik? You learn his Torah and you're getting his very essence that he put into that Torah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. Now the question is how much we can appreciate of it. That's our work. Obviously we're going to have limits in how much we can relate to and how much we experience. But that's Torah is essentially that that's the interface, the Moshla Kadmoni, like he called it earlier, that we use. But we need to grow. That's why the journey never ends. If a person ever reaches that place of the Etzem, that's another discussion. The fact is that it's a constant journey, but it's in the Torah. Point is, you have something to work with, because there you have Hashem is saying, you want to know, you want me? You want to connect with me? You want to know who I am and what I'm like and everything I want? This is the place, the Torah.
I think it's just beautiful the way it's expressed, that we are actually calling Hashem when we're reading Torah. We're calling him to come close to us. It's just beautiful, very poetic.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? And keep in mind as well, what he's saying now in the parentheses, that Torah is ayin and bottle. If Torah was a mitzias, you can make the argument what you're asking would be a very fair question. How could a mitzias contain the infinite of atzmos or beyond infinite? But remember, Torah, he said earlier, was ayin and bottle, koyach ma. And that's why nothing limits it. Like he says now, v'hu lefi, next parentheses. And the reason for this, that Torah is this way, lefi sheyesh b'chochma zu b'chinas bittul da'ayin u'ma. Because in this chochma of Torah, it's not just mathematics. It's not the wisdom of science or medicine or of this world. It's a wisdom of Hashem. It has in it the bittul of ayin, of bittul, of nothingness, and ma, koyach ma, the Etzem betachlis. At its core, fundamentally and again unequivocally, shemitam zeh sheira ba ma'atzmis ein sof kanal, and that's why in it resides, because of its bittul. In it resides the ein sof of the highest levels, the core of ein sof. Al kein nitchem epanov, and that's why in turn, that's why nitchem epanov, from in its face, harbe min acheshach. Kol b'chinas gases v'yeshes the klipas nega. That it dispels and it's just like shines a light through, and everything gets this and everything of the dark and of the darkness.
It pushes it away.
Yeah. Of the gas, I'm just reading the pun of Harbe min acheshach. Kol b'chinas gases v'yeshes the klipas nega. All the crassness and the arrogance of klipas nega. Because remember, the antithesis to kedusha, like he says in Tanya, is the opposite of bittul. It's about me, the self. Torah is utter bittul. It's utter bittul, and it's drawing from these highest levels of it's able to draw from these highest levels. That in turn just completely dispels and pushes aside and pushes away anything that's antithetical to that, which namely is gasus and yeshus of klipas nega, like he said. Now I know you'll say, didn't we say klipas nega associates with the lower level of darkness, which is the lower level of chochma chashmal tachten? So let's wait to see how he's going to explain that. But right now, the Torah does that because the Torah does tell us what is right and what is wrong, and the process is clarifying. Yeah. I'm going to stop here simply because I would have liked to go on to the end of the paragraph, but I here introducing a few more words and ideas, and I want to explain it properly, not just go through it quickly. Namely, ban and sag and teyu. But he's just going to add a few more points. But the theme that we learn now is going to continue till the end of the paragraph on next page. And then he's going to go over to Chochma Tata, Torah Shebal Peh.
Are we having class tomorrow? Because you're speaking in Palm Beach, aren't you?
Tomorrow there's no class. I said Tuesday and Wednesday. Tomorrow and Wednesday I'll be out of town. Yes, tomorrow my flight is 11:30. Yeah, I have to leave here. Yeah, before 9:30 or not. So tomorrow and Wednesday no class. And I believe I mentioned as well Thursday there will be, but Friday and Sunday also no class. Going to Montreal. So basically this week,
Just
Tuesday,
Thursday.
Wednesday, and Friday, and then next Sunday no class. We'll post it. If you post it, fine, or I'll post it. One of us will post it.
I'm happy to do it.
And we'll resume on
Friday. We have Friday.
No, he said no.
Oh,
Just
no.
Thursday.
Just
Thursday.
Thursday.
This Thursday. Yeah.
Between today and next Monday, just on Thursday. One more
Yeah,
day.
that's what I thought, but then I thought when he repeated it, he said, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then we'll resume on Monday the 1st. Let's see here. And then I think we're fine for a while. They're still traveling the week after. I mean, doing some traveling these days. There'll be another, well, the week of the 7th, 8th, I'll be away for also a day or two. Okay, all for good reasons. So let's stop here. Close to the bottom of page 410.